You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
All right, people, you know that sound. That is the Unfiltered Band, which means another episode of Unfiltered is upon us. Episode number 24. 2 days, 2 días, until we get to the trade deadline. Prospects are cool. Parades are cooler. Is your team going to be the coolest, or are they going to be foolish? We'll find out here within the next 48 hours as we thank, of course, the Unfiltered Band. Sit down, please. You can follow me, Never Sit Down, stay up to date with all things on my YouTube channel, as well as getting me on Twitter at Casey Stern. Follow all the different things going on, and, of course, stay in touch with all the great things with us here at the Believe Network as well. I want to start with this as I kind of catch up to date on some of the latest, and we talk about what to expect here in the next couple of days, as well as looking back a little bit at what's happened so far. Remember this, and this is important for all of you, all right? If you want to complain about what your team hasn't done, it's okay. But you want to wait until after the deadline is over. Now, I know it becomes easier when a player that you wanted, right, goes somewhere else. Example, Yankee fans, and we'll get into the Luis Castillo deal here in a second, are upset we didn't get Luis Castillo. That could happen, right? You don't know exactly what you had offered, and we could hear, don't tell me, please, well, I already was on Twitter that so-and-so these were the names. I have had so many situations over the last 20 years where I could tell you about players who entire fan bases hate because they turned down all these dollars that apparently they were offered, and they never even were offered a contract. And I talked to those teams' execs, and they never wanted to keep the players. Yet somehow, of course, and the somehow being it gets leaked out by one side or the other to help their own position. It gets leaked out by a team that, hey, we tried and yada, yada. And, maybe the player doesn't, fire back, want to get involved. And because of that, they still get booed in these stadiums. And there are at least 3 or 4 that come to mind immediately, including one player that was supposedly offered over $100 million. And the team didn't want him back or offer him a dime. And they still booed him for years. Doesn't play anymore. So let's not hear like, hey, we know for a fact this is what was offered. And our team didn't do enough to get Castillo, for example, right? Just using as an example, but the Mariners did. That can make you mad, but you don't know what's going to happen between now and the deadline. And a lot of that comes down to, keep in mind, people, we don't even know who's going to be available between now and the deadline. And that may sound stupid. Like, what the hell are you talking about, Casey? We're 2 days away. Of course we know who. What is one game? And it does seem silly, right? Like, okay, you tell me, like, if I win 10-0, like, this is what we as fans do, right? You're not supposed to do this as a team. You're going to tell me you're going to overreact if we win 10-0 today and you're not going to sell, but you're a seller if we lose 10-0? That sounds ridiculous. It may not be exactly as matter of fact and black and white as that. Everything's all shades of gray, just not the 50 kind. When you sit there and you look at this, though, we're talking about everything being tenuous based on where a team is in the standings, what's happening with the teams around them in the standings in terms of how many teams do I have to jump, how far am I behind? And we're also talking about fielding offers. You may be taking calls. San Francisco Giants, let's start there. Great example, right? Do they buy or do they sell? It's a difficult question to answer, right? And I think a lot of it comes down to, can Farhan Zaidi convince the ownership that they need to go the other way? I'm not comparing the two situations entirely, but let's go back when he first went there, and you've got Boch in his final year, and all the veterans are there, and he wants to take, Mad Bum was still there, he wants to take one more shot. They were 3 or 4 games out of a playoff spot. Nobody thought they were really viable as any kind of a contender. But that's a building that, to me, still for big games is, I think, when you take aesthetics and atmosphere, I think it's the best park in the league right now in San Fran. So they know that. It's an ownership that wants to win. They know the concert-like mentality that comes to the park every day down the stretch in September into October when they have a chance to win, and they didn't want to give that up. And a lot of people got very upset. Well, why would they hold on to that? Who cares about, taking another chance? You think about the Kansas City Royals. Remember, everybody yelled at them a few years ago when, they didn't at the time want, Hosmer, Moustakas and those players to go, and they tried to hold on to what they could and take one more shot with what they had, and it didn't work out. And then people said, well, here are the things you should have gotten for those players, right? When you look at the Giants, I don't know that one game is going to determine anything. But what happens that we don't think about, right, is they might be getting offers right now for Carlos Rodon or Jock Peterson or Brandon. I'm just bringing up names, right? that are or, some of their relievers that are at like this level. And all of a sudden, now names go off the board. So Castillo goes off the board. What if Frankie Montas gets traded today? And I'm just throwing this out there, right? Let's say to the Yankees, right? Or the Cardinals. He's off the board. And now everyone's calling because Carlos Rodon, the best show in town. And I don't care rent or not, or you don't know if you're going to sell or not. Now I'm doubling my offer. This is sales, right? It's not baseball. It's business. This is about supply and demand. It's about striking when the iron's hot. It's about leverage. It's about having the hand, if you will, if you want to talk Seinfeld. That's what this is, right? So the deals are going to be a lot sweeter and more enticing as you get closer to the deadline if you're a team like the San Francisco Giants for some of your players. Will that change anything? I don't know, right? But you can't sit there and say, as a fan of a team, well, we suck. We didn't do what we need to do. Now, I, of all people, as you know, and the prospects are cool, parades are cooler guy, because I do believe you push the pedal down. It's why I love what Seattle did. You haven't been in a postseason in 21 years, all right? You're hosting an all-star game next year. You got a chance really to maximize something. You got Julio Rodriguez, who, right now, in terms of buzzwords in the sport, I would tell you, and it's hard to really kind of, monetize or to figure out how to quantify this, but I would say you're looking at Juan Soto and Ohtani in large part because we're at the deadline, but also the kind of players they are, right? Aaron Judge, because of the 42 homers and counting. And then I'm giving you Julio Rodriguez. He right there for me. That's probably the fourth guy. You tell me he's not, right? You want to say DeGrom because we're waiting for him to come back, like in the like, where are you right now? Yeah, maybe in this moment, but like Julio Rodriguez for what he is, right there, right? I got a chance now to sit there and take a shot with a year plus of a guy I just brought who now makes my rotation. And I saw a couple people put out there, they're the best rotation in baseball. I think that's, jumping the gun way too soon. I also don't think it's accurate, especially if DeGrom's healthy. The idea of that to me is insane. Like, there's no way you could say that. If DeGrom is healthy, and it doesn't mean, by the way, this is not anybody who knows me over the 20 years. I may be wearing a Met hat, and I don't lie about my allegiances, but I'm harder on that team than anything. I'm not going easy on them. I'm not a homer in terms of the fact that, yeah, sure, I want them to win. I'm not going to lie to you, right? But I don't think everything is beautiful in Metland, all right? And for the most of the time, it hasn't been bumpy roads, beautiful places. It's been just bumpy roads to bumpier roads to more construction to I'm stuck in traffic, right? It's like living a life with Angel Hernandez in a relationship with the Mets, all right? So I'm not easy on them, but I'm just being fair. I mean, you tell me, you can at me on Twitter or respond here and comment in the video or in the podcast. If you're telling me that you really believe that if DeGrom's healthy, there's any other rotation than better, then you're an idiot. I'm sorry. Like, there's no way. There's no guarantees. Doesn't mean they're going to win the whole thing. But on paper, if I got Scherzer and DeGrom and you don't, you could sit down. And by the way, after the you don't, I got Taijuan Walker, who should have been an all-star, Carrasco, who's pitching well again, and Bassett, who's been good for most of the year when he's been healthy, and then McGill, who I don't even need to use anymore, and David Peterson, who you'd see and try to use in a bullpen, and both of those guys have been valuable. Peterson not even on the team right now. That's the kind of depth. Nobody's got that depth or that front end and that 1-2. But what Seattle has added is they've added excitement and excitement in the room. And I want to start and talk about that because this is something that is a real thing. There are often scenarios that we overblow and we make a big deal out of as fans or covering the sport that don't exist. They're not a big deal. But if you've been listening to the podcast with me over the years, I always try and tell you, like, and it's not because, please understand, this is from talking to people in the game. Like, when I learn things and I pick up stuff, and I have no problem saying it's not like I'm some genius. I'm telling you that in talking to the people myself, right, it is a very real thing. And it makes common sense, but it's a very real thing. For players in a room, the energy it brings, not just when you know how much you now upgraded your rotation. They're not stupid. They know now they have a better chance to win with Castillo added to Ray and Gilbert in that group, right? It's not just about that. It's this team. This is what happens psyche-wise. This team, this group, this ownership, this GM, and Jerry DiPoto in this case, right? They believe that we're a playoff team. They care about us. They buy into us. They are believers in our chances. They are not just eye-washing us about, hey, we're trying to win, which is what the Twins have done as a franchise for like every trade deadline since the beginning of time. All right? That's why they don't get a Luis Castillo. And they don't. I mentioned this the other day. They won the division a couple of years ago. It's a great story. I love Sergio Romo. That's my dude. You can't have him as the big move at the deadline, at least not if we're talking a couple of years ago and not 8 years ago, right? It's not enough. But they don't do that. We're just used to the Yankees again, and we'll get our playoff tickets a couple of times, and we'll just leave. That's what losers do in this sport. So for Seattle, and they haven't done everything perfect. Remember, regardless of how Kelenic has played, the whole situation of the egg on the face, you're at a Knights of Columbus meeting, and your ownership is looking like, completely forget about horrible people, let alone just horrible business people, right? They've had egg on the face. They haven't made it in 21 years. It seems like they won 86 games, I don't know for how many years in a row, and didn't get in. And a lot of that is, right, go back to each of those seasons. We didn't push enough. We're kind of there. We're on, we are, to use, and I'm a huge Springsteen guy, as most of you know. They're always stuck in the darkness on the edge of town. They never actually get in it, right? They're out there at the border. They're in now. And it's no guarantee they're going to make the playoffs. No guarantee. But they got a real shot now. And it's a real shot in the arm in the room. If you think about this, imagine what happens on the other side. And let's take tangible things that we can look at, right? Dallas Keuchel with the Astros. And then, look, I don't know. And, Jeff Luhnow, it's a whole other conversation. But I can tell you, I've told this story in the air before. This is a very, very true story. I was ripping, and I mean just to shreds, when I was on MLB Network Radio, every day. Anybody who listened to it knows it. And you can go back probably and see it on Twitter still and search it. I was destroying the Astros when the original deadline, this is before now we only have one. We had the waiver deadline then, right? I was destroying them for not doing anything. I mean, what Dallas Keuchel was upset about, and I'm sure a lot of players in the room, I was destroying them, right? Now, I'm not going to say that they hadn't initially planned on working with Verlander towards the waiver deadline, or they wouldn't have done it anyway. And I'm not saying this is because of me, but when Dallas Keuchel and those players, right, start to make comments about, how are we not doing something to get better? Yeah, it absolutely pushed the pedal on Jeff Luhnow. But the story I'll tell, and this is absolutely accurate, is I would say maybe 11 or 12 champagne celebrations for the Warriors, and blessed to, it's not a humble brag, I'm blessed to do so. And to be in there doing live shows for those celebrations on radio for anybody who listened. They're some of the most fun times in my career, right? And in fact, I mentioned Sergio Romo before. One of my favorite moments was when they won the World Series in San Francisco, and he was in the middle of the champagne celebration crying, talking about what it meant to him in terms of, conversations with his parents and his family and his kids, and that's the kind of stuff that's just amazing. I remember, I talked about it on the air at the time, walking past the hallway in the Giants room when they won. I think this was the Mad Bum year in Kansas City. And Ryan Vogel's such a good dude. But what a great story, played overseas, was with his family in Boch's office having a quiet moment. And I think it was in Kansas City because it was the visitor's office. And just watching them, and I didn't stay long, but just even seeing them embrace and the tear. And those are the moments okay, you feel it. You get it, right? What it all means. But Jeff Luhnow, I mean, when I tell you, douse me in champagne, in my eyes, pouring it on my head, and if you go back, it's probably available somewhere on SiriusXM in some old format you can find. But if you find that post-game show, and he literally is pouring it in my eyes as he's saying to me, yeah, I got sick of hearing about Verlander, over and over again. These guys, they listen, they know, and it's not just to me, anybody, right? They understand, they feel that pressure, right? But a lot of them don't make the moves. And you think about Jose Bautista. He got really upset one year when Toronto was in it. They were 2 games. You got to check. It might have been an Oriole fan will remember. It might have been 2.5 games back. And this had to be, because I think that was my first year with Turner in the playoffs when the Orioles made a run. It had to be 2014. Maybe it was the 2015 season. It was one of those 2 years. And the Orioles won that division by 15 games. It was the year where Buck and company had the most we've ever seen, extra inning and late inning, one-run wins for a team ever. I think they won 17 of them. It was some ridiculous number, right? And a lot of that because of their managing with Buck. But I remember Jose Bautista flipping out, and I don't know how that permeates in a room necessarily. Some guys don't care. Some will. But what? You don't think we're good enough? You're not going to put the money into us? You're not going to invest? And it's an ownership thing more than certainly Alex Anthopoulos, who's certainly not afraid, right? It's like I said when Alex moved here with Atlanta and he was doing 1-year deals for Josh Donaldson. I was saying to people, that's Liberty Media. That's the ownership. Alex Anthopoulos, you can't give, Dale Earnhardt Jr. a 1988 Toyota Camry and say, here, go, or a Dodge Neon, and go do what you do in your race. You just can't do that, right? Like, here's a Schwinn bike. Good luck, right? You can't do that. But that's what happened. Well, when Alex wasn't hampered, was the year after that, because the Jays flopped. They did nothing. And you go back and look at it, and now they're making 10-player deals at a deadline. They're getting in a wild card, and like the Mariners, 20 years for them, right? 21 for Seattle. They're making moves. And I think Seattle's going to get to the postseason. There's no guarantee, but good for them for making that move. Now it puts more pressure on the Yankees, who absolutely have got to figure this out. And I thought for a long time that they would have been that 1-1 team for Castillo, and I know they were certainly in on it. Let's be honest. Seattle gave a haul in terms of prospects, and they do matter. The idea of the shirt and the saying isn't like, hey, forget every prospect you ever had. It's you got to take risks and chances. They may not work. They may not work. I mentioned the Giants before. Everything they did seemed to turn to gold. Not everything. They rented Carlos Beltran for Zach Wheeler. That did not work out well, right? But it did work out well when Beltran was rented by the Astros from Kansas City and hit 8 home runs in a postseason, right? So sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But you, to me, what ifs are the worst thing in life. They're the worst thing in sports. You got to go for it and take a shot. And if it doesn't work, then you say, hey, look, at least I tried. Like, I don't know about you, but as a fan even, I'm like, okay, you go for it. It doesn't do anything. I'm okay with that. So I always say to my dude, Steve Phillips, who I've had the pleasure of being friends with and worked with for years, that, anybody who ever got on Steve for getting Robbie Alomar, like, you're an idiot. Like, and it didn't pan out with the Mets. I mean, it was a nightmare. It was a complete nightmare, right? You had writers saying he didn't want to play. It was like, I always joke about the Mets in, I think it was 88, used to have on Shea Stadium, Met catch the fever, right? And really, the Met fever is what you catch when you get there. It's what you alleviate and have a cure, vaccination or not, right? When you leave, Kevin Mitchell out, I'm great. Kevin McReynolds in, I'm not. Carlos Baerga in, I'm not. Burnitz, let's go twice. We could talk about 9 million other things, right? Vince Coleman's throwing firecrackers, and you can add to the list. Clearly, I think in a lot of these cases, teams that at least they try because the name and the perception is great, and then the reality doesn't work. That may happen here. Castillo may not pitch well. Doesn't mean the move was the wrong move. It's what it was at the time. You can't tell me it was the bad idea. It was a great idea, and good for them for doing it. But you can't wait till now and then get mad. You have to wait until after the deadline. We got to see what happens here the next 48 hours. This is where leverage shifts. If I've got a rental, right, I'm sitting there and saying, no, that's not enough for me. Click, not enough for me. Click, this guy offered me that, so you better give more. Okay, I got them on hold, and you're doing things. This is sales, right? Business, not baseball, okay? But just like sales and business, let's go back to a deadline. This is not when a parent says to a kid, you do that one more time, and you're out of the pool. And I know from experience saying that, okay? Right? You have to do it. And it sucks. And, you got to take them out, whether it's the rest of the day or an hour, because the next time they're going to make sure to behave when other people are around, whatever the case is, right? As parents, we go through that. Even kids, my youngest daughter is 5, and I think she's smarter than I am. So it's they know, all right? Kids can be evil that way. They remember, I know there's no deadline, right? Because you said the last time and you right? This is a deadline. There's no waiver deadline. There's no other deadline. There's no other way to get players. This is the deadline. If I got a rental and I'm a team that I'm losing this player, right, and this asset, because that's what they are in these trades. We're talking about stocks, right, and where they are as investments, and we're talking about assets and product. That's what this is right now. That's why how many GMs after trades, when you see them in a presser, they say the player, we think we got a good player, the third baseman, right? And a lot of that is not rude. It's just that this becomes that, right? This is not like, do you draft the plus stuff or the character, because everyone's got plus stuff, right? This is sincerely, it is just assets and what is the value and what am I getting and where are we? Well, when the deadline is over, here's where you are. You got no shot. That's it, right? You can't make a deal. If you're stuck with a rental, you stuck with the rental. You ain't going nowhere, right? That guy's playing for you. And If you think you could sign them long term or you still have a chance to get in the postseason, those things may be viable options for you. But in most cases, what happens is what would happen for any of us if there's actually a hard deadline, right? Not the TV channel that you go on and say, if you dial in the next 30 minutes, you can get this CD and you could hear Up Where We Belong and several other beautiful 70s and 80s hits. No. Like, that every 30 minutes, it's the same thing, right? I hope you people know that, right? Like, oh, you're on the HDTV. Wow, that ring is just for sale if I call in the next 5 minutes. Do you really believe that? Like, you think in 5 minutes and 2 seconds, it's going to be like years ago in Domino's, if you weren't there in 30 minutes, it's free? Like, come on. You can't be that stupid, right? I hope. So in this case, though, there's a deadline. I'm stuck. The leverage shifts all of a sudden, and it's tangible in the conversations and talking to executives over the last couple of decades, and it makes sense. That's why if you're new to kind of being with me, and hopefully you'll stick with me in the Unfiltered Revolution that we're on, and you're going to learn that this is how I always going to be. When I say dumb it down, I mean for us, me and you, and I don't mean in terms of intelligence. I mean, okay, we're trading players in a fantasy league. Please let's not compare it. Like, I love the people who call me, like, I've had calls like on the air over the years, like, somebody's got a pitch count. Well, I'm pitching in high school, or, I'm coaching in Little League, and like when I was this, and okay, that's great, but can we not compare it, right? It's not the same thing, all right? I'm not telling you I have any idea what it's like to go trade someone, but in conversations with people at the deadline, I know thinking of what's happened, right? And a lot of it, to be honest with you, because I don't break news for a living, I believe, and this is an industry thing, I'm curious what people think, I know many watch and listen who are in the industry. I believe I probably get, and people like me, maybe more information sometimes than people who break news. We just can't say anything, right? Because that's why they'll tell me. But I take those things and I learn from it, and I learn kind of the psyche of it. So I try and dumb it down to human element. And the human element is this simple, people. If you truly had a deadline, like on Ticketmaster or wherever, if you're trying to get Bruce Springsteen tickets, and really, like, it's at 218, 217, I got to figure out, am I pressing that credit card or not? You got 217 to make that decision. That's it. Next time you go in, you're probably in the back of the row. You're getting a dial tone, a busy signal. It's sold out already. Like, that's how it feels for these guys as they get closer to the deadline. And it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, that the buyers then have all the hand? Because, yeah, okay, certainly I need somebody. I need someone. But I got, it's not 29, but I got 7, 8 teams I could call. I got 6, 7 other players like the guy you have. How many other people you got like me? What are you going to do when the deadline's done and you're stuck with the guy? Yeah, maybe you could sign him long term, and maybe he's a fan favorite and you keep him for that reason, even though I think that's stupid a lot of times. I mean, I remember, I don't want to get into anybody specific, because Eddie's a great dude, but I remember Jack Sorensic, speaking of the Mariners, many years ago, having a conversation, was on the air, trying to explain to me about they weren't going to trade Raul Ibanez because he was beloved by the fans, and he was old, and I love Raul. He was a terrific guy. He was a great player, and they didn't want to move him. And this was a guy who had already been moved before. Look what happened, speaking of the Orioles, when the Yankees got him, and he basically ended Jim Johnson's career as a closer, right, in one series. Like, you can't tell, like, okay, the fans would be upset. He's a fan favorite. Like, yeah, no. All right? And plus, this isn't Hank Aaron. Like, we're not talking about, like, Mario Lemieux playing for the Penguins for his whole life, and it's like his last 4 days there. Even the Bochy situation I brought up before, which, okay, there's certainly some value there. There were 3 World Series with the team, right? There are never good reasons to just hold on to a player because of what the fans think. But there is a pressure to do something because of what the fans and the players in the room think. And I think you'll see that change over the next couple of days. You can keep posted on all the things going on at the deadline, all the specifics. We'll break down all the trades as they happen. And if you haven't found this out already, I will be live on Twitter. I'm going to try something. I don't know if anyone has ever really tried this, but I'm that guy. The guy I always joke at the finale of Top Chef. How many times, how many shows have you watched like this? I'm going to try, and they asked them, so you're cooking something, or Gordon Ramsay will ask Master Chef, right? And I love food, as you could tell, really, cooking shows. But are you really going to try something you'd never cooked? Or like you watch American Idol, I'm going to sing something I don't know. Like, are you sure about, I learned the lyrics this morning, but we're going to give it a shot. And you're already out the door, really, honestly. But I'm going to try something that I don't know has ever been even attempted or necessarily even close to successful. But I'm going to do 3 hours, like a live radio show, like I've done for the deadline for, I don't know, I think I did 17 years of them overall. And the last 12, 13 seasons of MLB Network Radio. I'm going to do that for 3 hours on Twitter at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, deadline day on Tuesday. and work with guests coming on the fly, breaking down the deals on the fly, talking to you and interacting through chat on the fly, all of that. And it's going to be crazy, and I'll probably, sweat like Patrick Ewing at the foul line, but we'll have a fun time with it. So keep me abreast of what you think on your thoughts at Casey Stern. I'll do the same with all the stuff going on. My YouTube channel, I've got one obviously for Unfiltered in all of our episodes, and if you're watching that here, I've got another one where there's music and family and shenanigans. And thanks for being a part of this ride. Let's continue to do it. We've got about, at this point when I'm taping this, about 50 hours or so, 51 hours until we get to the deadline. I'm excited to see what happens. Hope